Welcome back to Old Guy REI. Today, Mikey's back with me. We're going to be going over the highlights of our last Wednesday accountability Zoom call. That was for February 26th. This year's going fast.
So fast. Number 35, 35th accountability meeting, runtime 2 hours, 30 minutes. It was a good one.
Yeah, it was good. We had, I think, one new person joined us, but she's actually comes from the Ladies of ORAT accountability group. And, I was kind of teasing her a little bit because I think some of the female investors in this community are so smart. I've been wanting to join their call, but I didn't want to get kicked out. I don't think that would happen, but still a little bit uncomfortable being the only guy amongst all those women, especially with all their knowledge. But she actually lives in Oregon, and their first rental was a duplex house hack, and they just moved out of that. So things seem to be going well for her. And we mentioned a few other of our friends that are in Oregon as well, and she's already connected with a couple of them. So that was really great to hear. We've talked in recent weeks about, whether your partner's on board or cares about you investing and things like that. It sounds like her spouse is on board, and talking about the recent ORAT event in Vegas, a few of our friends took their spouses who weren't totally on board with them in the beginning, but after going to the event and meeting all these other people that are trying to do the same thing, it moved them a little bit, and they kind of understood a little bit better, what their husbands were trying to do, and kind of got on board, and now are looking for ways to help them. So that was really cool.
And that was such a good takeaway where people who haven't started yet, but were at the event, there's no judgment. And it's just everyone is encouraging each other. If there's anything I can help with, anything you have questions on, to the REI Avengers or anyone who has maybe done deals, then it's a great place to just level up.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think for a lot of people, they talk about not having anyone else to talk real estate with because, even in our own families, we might be the only person or couple that's doing it. A lot of people think it's a waste of time, it's a lot of headaches. But you mentioned those people that were brave enough to raise their hand, showing that they didn't have any rentals. I got excited about that. Those are the kind of people I want to talk to and hopefully be able to give a little bit of information, help them understand some of the challenges that we've been going through, and that everything is working out just fine. It might help them take the first step. So that's always nice to hear.
Yeah, and your Wednesday accountability meetings, those are for everybody. It doesn't have to be only school members. And we've had people just come in, maybe they want to ask a question about a door replacement, and then you have 3 decades of experience as a contractor. And there's also other contractors in the call too, and they can all chip in and offer different tips and advice on how to do certain things. So if people are having questions with a specific repair or anything like that, or maybe even reviewing a quote, because we've done that as well, that's the type of value you can get.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people in the group that are much more experienced than we are, and I have to admit sometimes I even get lost because the strategies or the concepts are over my head. But it really helps everybody else in the group who's maybe at that level or is interested in that type of investing or asset. So that's really cool. Um, but it is very um, it's a great feeling when we do get the new people in that haven't got started yet or are having trouble with whether it's like you mentioned before, inspection reports and understanding what that's all about, or they need a roof and they're trying to get different bids, just understanding that all the bids are the same material, for example. because the bids could vary if one guy's using a cheaper shingle or something than the other guy. So the different degrees of experience has been really helpful over the months. We had the meeting started though with a question about how people list their rentals, and one of our friends had mentioned that he actually lists on Facebook Marketplace and uses Hemlane, and I think he said he copied his listing from Facebook Marketplace and put it on Hemlane, so he was able to copy and paste it. I hadn't heard about that before. When I checked with our property manager, because we have some rentals up for rent in St. Louis, and I asked them how many platforms they listed our place on, and it was like 30 different places. A lot of them I hadn't even heard of before. But I was glad to hear that it wasn't just on Zillow or something like that. Where have you seen your rentals listed before?
I've seen it on Zillow and also on the property management's website, their rental section of the
Okay.
website.
Okay.
And
And
I think it's really cool that you have weekly reports for your just how the rental is going. So I like that a lot.
yeah, that it's a pretty detailed report. It starts out with, how many views it's gotten for the week and if there's any applications or interest, different things like that. So far, that one has taken quite a while to rent. We started the price a little bit high. I think we were shooting for the higher end of what the HUD FMR would be. And like I've mentioned a couple of times since then, the rents seem to be softening a little bit. So we've lowered that. And so tomorrow, Monday, the new report comes out. So we'll see if that's made a difference. We had originally started at about 1375. It's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. We dropped it to 12 with a half a month free. And that didn't change things much. But that's in St. Louis, and they've been getting snow. The weather's been pretty bad. I think that's affected things a little bit. So hopefully now that the weather's tapering off, we'll get a little bit better response to our ad. Speaking of renters, one of the people on the call was wondering how he might go about specifically targeting older renters in the hopes that they would stay longer. Maybe they're on fixed income or something. I know, we've talked with other members of our group, and sometimes that's a concern for them because if they get older renters, health issues might come up. One of our friends had that happen where she had older tenants and the husband passed away, and then the wife couldn't pay the rent by herself, and it ended up going bad from there. And she ended up having to evict the person, but she had a lot of repairs to do because the person kind of became a hoarder after the husband was gone. And sometimes not to be discriminatory or anything, but if somebody has like handicaps, for example, maybe they can't get around the home too easily, so you have to make accommodations for that. There's a lot of things to consider if you're looking for older renters, but we've talked to some of our mentors and some things that they do. For example, one of them doesn't really care to rent to families with children. So he mentions, if a tenant moves out, he'll remove the tub and just make that a shower, which is one way to push your rental towards specific groups and where you list your property as well. So some of the suggestions for this person was maybe to go to places where seniors gather, for lunch or to play cards or whatever it might be, and post your listing there. That was a good suggestion. do you try to limit your places to any specific group, or do you accept pets and things like that?
I accept small pets and based on the insurance requirements, and I pretty much rent as long as they have a certain set criteria that goes along with the property management. And I was wondering for a rental ad, how much it costs to actually put it in the paper, because maybe that might be a good way for older renters. And
Oh
it,
yeah.
an investor made a good point about what type of property do you have, because a lot of times if there's stairs or it's hard to get access maybe to the second and third floors, they won't even look at those type of properties. They want to be on the first floor and it'll rent for more and those type of things. So that was a good point by that investor.
Yeah, that was a good thought. I don't recall what this person, I know it was a duplex that they got, so I imagine it's single level, but yeah, that's a great point because stairs and things could be a challenge. There was one person that asked, and none of us on the call at that time had experience with this, but they were wondering if anyone had ever bought a foreclosure and what the process was like. So we're doing some digging this week to find anyone else in the group that might have done that. I have heard maybe of one or two other people speak of it. So we'll check out in the school community too and see if anybody has experience with that. You had appreciated the information that Chris brought that night about monitoring water and power and gas and things like that. If you have a multifamily property and those utilities are not separated, he had some good thoughts, didn't you think?
He actually did a deep dive for some metering on Lumberjack Landlords Boot Camp, and he had mentioned EKM as a good sub-metering program or type of service. So that's something to look into because I guess he's dug deep into this and really figured out between the different type of sub-metering options that this is probably the one that would fit his needs the most.
Yeah, when we first started looking at getting into properties in Ohio specifically, there was a property manager that I spoke with that did install separate like water meters for properties in his area. It was about a $5,000 cost. So I guess you have to weigh that. And um, this investor that you're talking about also mentioned that there were two options when he first started out, but they do require Wi-Fi. And one of the companies started having like a monthly fee. So he was trying to figure something else out about that. But he also talked about I guess, arranging with his tenants to jump onto their Wi-Fi so that the monitoring system would have a connection instead of him having to install separate Wi-Fi to the property just for that. I thought that was a really good point. What else did you take away from that meeting? I know you had some notes that I didn't catch.
It was interesting about the Master Wyoming LLC, how other investors they will have that as their main LLC and then split it up into different LLCs. I don't have an LLC based on Dion and his great video on that. And it just, as it makes it more complicated and there's more fees involved and those type of things. So just for my investing, I choose not to do an LLC. But I guess for larger investors or whatever partnerships, that is an interesting thing to look at. And then based on that, they were talking about the FinCEN and the BOI fees, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, along with the beneficial ownership info, saying that if you don't file for the deadline that has been pushed back to March, I believe, then be careful of the fees because that can get up to $50 a day. And over time, that could really add up. So they're just cautioning against that. And I know we had moved over to the 1099 contractors, and I know you could speak some on that.
Yeah, I think people were wondering they if it was okay to send out 1099s because if you don't have an LLC, then they would be sending them out with your social security number. And some CPAs were, I guess, a little timid about that, sending out your social on all these documents. But a few people in the group were just saying it's so easy for someone to track down your social if they wanted to. They didn't see much danger in doing it that way. And a couple of our investor friends do send them out with their social and have never had a problem. We do have an LLC that we started because of trying to acquire business credit, and it's basically a requirement for that. And a couple of people commented on the cost. Here in California, it is $800 a year. Some people don't see that that's a good use of money, but so I did have to go through the BOI and register the LLC this year. I would want to make sure that people understand that there shouldn't be a cost to do it. It's free if you go through the IRS website. When I first tried to do it, I went online and found a site, but then after I put all my information, they were asking for a payment of $250. And so I double checked with Mark, the financial firefighter, and he said, no, there shouldn't be a cost. So I almost, sent money to someone that wasn't legitimate. So be careful with that. And you're right. I think in the beginning, if you didn't file, it was $500 a day. I'm glad it got lowered, but still $50 a day could add up pretty quick. And you mentioned the LLC video from Dion. So that's Dion Talk Financial Freedom, and he has the LLC rant video on his channel. So you should check it out, and it shows a lot of reasons why an LLC doesn't protect you. Unless of course you are in a partnership, you want to have one, but a lot of people think they need LLCs to start buying real estate, and you don't.
That is a must-watch video. Financial firefighter actually sent me that video when I was just starting, and I said, "Should I get an LLC? Shouldn't I?" He sent me that video, and I was convinced ever since, and now I've been a fan of Dion from the beginning.
Yeah, and they also mentioned that some DSCR lenders require an LLC, but there are probably many more that don't. You can get a DSCR loan in your personal name too, so that's something you don't have to worry about. What other thoughts do you have about that meeting or anything else, really?
So it was kind of good hearing Lumberjack talk about the vacancy rates and how he checks that every year. So for New Hampshire, that was 0.8%, his vacancy rate. So once I heard that, I immediately checked Google, and Pittsburgh, I think it's in between 7.5 to 8.6. So that surprised me. And that's something I'm going to be checking yearly.
Yeah, when you say Pittsburgh, is that in the area that you invest in specifically, or Pittsburgh as a whole? Because when when we run our analysis, if we're looking at buying a property, in the past, we typically set aside 5% for vacancy. But now that you mentioned this, Cynthia and I are also going to dive into it and see if we can find accurate numbers for our markets. And a few people in the past have mentioned that the areas that we invest in, we might want to up that a little bit to 8%, maybe even increase what we set aside for CapEx or maintenance. That's been 5% over the years, but I think that should go up a bit as well, maybe to 10%. So when you looked up your vacancy rate, was it like a specific zip code or neighborhood or?
I believe it's overall, but this is just a quick Google search, and this is something I have to do more research on as well. So I'm glad Matt brought it up because it's something I have to dig into further.
Yeah, that's a good point. And you and I also talked about the fact that when we get excited about buying a property, sometimes we don't take the time to investigate these things. And then once we own the property, we find out, oh, the taxes are higher in this city or this state, or like you just mentioned, vacancy rates could be higher. And if we knew those things in advance and the numbers were higher than we thought, then the deal might not pencil. So um, I think in this whole learning curve, it's nice because since we do have some properties and now we're wanting to stabilize them, so we're not so consumed by, wanting to buy the next property yet. We're digging in and finding out what all these costs actually are. So hopefully we'll be able to make a better decision on the next property and really make sure it's going to cash flow to our expectations.
And that's what I love is because we can share our numbers back and forth and we can just compare how are you running this and how am I running this? Then we're like, oh, did you see this part of the property? And that stuff I can't pick up on. And we'll hear Dion talk about he does 15% for capex and vacancy. But then for us, maybe we go up to 20 just because of where we're investing in our markets. So it's like just ironing out those details. And I just looked over a property that maybe was offered to me, and then when I kind of ran everything, it just didn't make sense. So it's just the power of saying no and trying to be better at that for me. And it's like also, how do you review properties? Like, do you go into it being more optimistic of the numbers or being more pessimistic? And I think you're better off having pessimism as your base when you're running numbers, because then if worse comes to worse, at least you know your base. Instead of going into it optimistically, then your numbers while you're into it actually go further down than you expected.
Yeah, I think for us, I know, and I think you spoke about it a little bit too. You get so excited and caught up, and wow, I'm going to get my first property. And sometimes either you might ignore certain signs, right? We talk about following your gut. And I know for me, my gut has said slow down or watch this or watch that. And I ignored it. And it ended up catching me later. But also, some people will massage numbers to try to get the cash on cash return that they want. And I would hope that from listening to us, just really think about it because you're going to hopefully have that property for a long time. And if it doesn't perform like you expected, it's going to take longer before it does start performing. And if you don't have the reserves to carry you through all that time, you'll end up losing the property and it might knock you out and make you not want to invest anymore. But the longer you can hold on to a property, the better it's going to be. I think now that we've gone through these situations, it's easy for us to say, hold on and don't rush and things like that. But we were on the other side of that too recently.
I learned the most from other investors' mistakes, and I really appreciate them sharing that. So we're just trying to do the same because I'm a prime example of massaging the numbers, and I've fallen problematic into problems with that. So just try to move on one step at a time.
Yeah, we're lucky we fell into a great group of people and have great mentors. You mentioned something earlier about one of the newer groups that we're in with Aaron Amin and Nathan doing doing their out of state investor group that they created. And I think we were talking a little while ago about their hot seat. What can you tell us about that? And what do you expect to get out of it?
Yeah, it's good because it's the Remote Real Estate Academy, and it's a smaller group, but it's based on out-of-state investors. They are pretty good at just having one-on-one, just mastermind sessions with either Aaron or Nathan, depending on their schedule, but they have a calendar set up, so it's based on the times that works for you. And a hot seat is whatever topic you're going to, whatever pressing issue you're going to, you can schedule a hot seat immediately, then hop on a call. It will be recorded, but it's to help the entire group that's in that academy. It also comes with a course alongside it. So I've just finished the course. I got a lot out of it, and I'm just planning to explain my portfolio, say what could they put calls in, or let's run numbers, and I'm just really big on that because you can never get enough advice and just trying to get different perspectives on what you're doing. It's only gonna help you.
Yeah, and I think like I was telling you a little while ago, um, all of the challenges that we've had over the last year mainly, and we expressed those in the group. So they asked me also if I wanted to do a hot seat session, and I'm really looking forward to that. But also, over the last couple of months, they've gone deep into certain markets that they see that are good to start investing in. The first one that I can remember was Detroit last month, I believe, and they bring people on that invest in those markets, and can help investors if they want to start investing in those markets. And I think Cynthia and I are particularly lucky because Nathan also invests in St. Louis, and they just popped up and said they're going to do a deep dive in the St. Louis market, and they have someone on that's going to be presenting and has options to help investors if they want to get started there, not just buying properties, but also connecting them with people that can help them if they need work or rehabs or things like that. So I'm excited to jump on that one. I think I had to think for a minute about the hot seat because sometimes it's a little hard to share your problems, in and air them in public, but we know from the ORAC group and from our calls, that's never an issue because nobody ever criticizes you. They're always just listening and hoping they could help you in some way. And it's the same thing with Aaron and Nathan's group too. So I put that aside right away, and I think it would be great to get some more experienced investors take on what we're doing, and show them our real numbers. Don't hide anything, and otherwise you can't get help. If you keep anything back, they're not going to be able to help you uh, as you hope they will. So, for anybody out there listening, do you mind if I ask how much was it to join the group these days?
I believe it was nine in the 900 range a year, so maybe 947 if I had that right. But I think they upped it to about 1500 a year for newer members. But you can always check and email Aaron directly, maybe have a one-on-one, just a preface, just to see if it makes sense for you if you're a non-estate investor.
Yeah, and we've talked about that too, about the mentorships we've been in and how much we've paid. Um, I think Dion's is probably the most reasonable right now. I think it's around $400 to $500. The Lumberjacks, his course is about $1,000, and the boot camp that you buy separately is also $1,000. But we got so much information and so much help in those groups. The the course being separate than the boot camps, I think you and Cynthia and I have both gotten so much value out of the boot camps that it's worth it just for that. And in Dion's course, he goes every other month, and he'll do course calls with us, usually an hour to an hour and a half. He also has his members only groups, that if you want to look at deals, he does that separately. And we also spend an hour to an hour and a half on those. Those are usually only twice a month, and they rotate from, he'll do some on weekends one month and then Tuesdays on the next month, things like that. And Matt, he gave us so much time on our boot camps with him. Like, at least for us, it was at least 3 hours a night on Saturdays or Sundays, whichever you end up signing up for. So, um, we put out some money for mentorships, but I think it was all worth it. I think we really got value out of everything we spent money on.
Yeah, I try to tell everyone once you're in Dion's course, it's like a never-ending subscription for the course calls. So you're having, oh, it's almost like a small mastermind every other month. And then for Lumberjack, going to his course, I haven't seen an ad written like how Matt's ads are written in Pittsburgh. It's really rare to see an ad written like how Matt's is written. And I
Mhm.
know a lot of other investors appreciate that. And then just the boot camps. is pretty much 35 plus hours for however, I think 9 sessions or however many sessions it is. And then his boot camp is going on right now, I believe.
Yeah, I think when we did his boot camp, it was 12 sessions.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, 12.
Yeah. So that, I mean, that's a lot of hours of help. And like you've mentioned before, he brings on people in his um, on his team. You know, his real estate agent, his attorneys. I think was his accountant on one time too. Did Bob
His
ever get on?
his lender
Oh, right, his lender.
and she was on fire. That like she was just going off on that one boot camp, and it's just amazing just to see in the 18 because I haven't ever seen a lender
Hmm.
drop that much information.
Yeah, and they share everything. They don't hold anything back. And you mentioned ads earlier. You were talking about his ads for rentals and how he writes them. Yeah, I've heard a lot of people that have gotten advice if their property isn't renting very well or very soon, and they have checked in with him about recommendations on how to change the ad to get better traffic. And in all the cases I've heard, it's improved, um, and they've rented the places really quickly after getting his help.
And for Aaron and Amin, he, we were talking about kind of deep thinking, and then we were kind of going back and forth with it. And Aaron and me had talked about idea capturing, and him and Nathan are really stressed on this. Where, like, for instance, like we've talked where we're just driving around, or we're just kind of mindlessly doing a task, and then a real estate idea pops in our head. What do we do with that idea? So I wanted to ask you that.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, sometimes I'll be driving around and something will pop into my head. If I don't pull over and write it down right away, it's just lost. We talk about there's so many things we'd like to do videos on this channel, and thoughts that questions we have for other people that might be great content. And then by the time I get to work or get home, the thought's gone, and it's long gone. So, um, did he have any suggestions on how to capture those? Did he say anything like, stop and write it down, or what he does to do it?
Exactly what we do is like once you have it, just make sure you get it on paper. However you do it on your phone. And even for me, when an idea pops in my head, I'll stop and then I'll just shoot myself my own email just to make a note of it. So when I get home, I can make sure I put it in the right place, whether it's Notion or Google Drive or Google Keep, just have different systems. And yeah, just him, Aaron, talking about the Eisenhower matrix, and we have to-do lists. We have like maybe a priority to-do list, a medium to-do list, a smaller to-do list, and just organizing that, trying to get that set up. But it's all a clutter and just trying to figure it out as we go, trying to make the best of it.
Yeah, I think for me, for sure, a to-do list helps because it's really, I guess, rewarding when you get to cross a line item out. You can see that you're making some progress, even if the list keeps growing on top of that. At least you're getting some things completed. So, I was talking to Dion this weekend about, because I'm always in my head. There's always so much in there, and it can hold you back, if you, like I said, the to-do list, if you can get some of it out on paper and start knocking the items out, otherwise it's just spinning around in there. And for me, it's, can make me depressed. It can make me feel like I'm not, um, obviously I'm not moving forward because I'm not accomplishing any of those things in my head. And also, if you write them out, sometimes you'll realize that some of those things are not very important. So you can cross those off the list right away and not even need to take any action, but at least it's out of your mind and something else can pop in there. So,
But we maintain the priority, and that's the main thing. Is like we're focused on the priority. Maybe the smaller stuff can be pushed to the side, but we're like slowly moving forward and seeing progress. So that's the main thing.
yeah, I think, I'm looking forward to this week's meeting and upcoming. I mentioned a couple of people that we're hoping to have on. One guy being a financial advisor. There's some people that are anxious and excited about that, and the other one, not that we know too many people that are investing in St. Louis, but the other guy is a St. Louis investor, and he wants to start a property management company. I think he's already started it, but his goals were to try to keep the service from the beginning. So sometimes when property management companies start out, they have smaller portfolios that they manage, and the service is very good. But as they grow and get spread kind of thin, the service declines. And his focus is to keep that great level of service while he grows, and he doesn't want the service to diminish over time. So I'm excited to see what he does there.
Yeah, really looking forward to that. And it's good to have a financial advisor that can also oversee real estate because he was an investor himself. So that was a good tip that you had mentioned.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about that for the next ORAT meeting next February of people we would like to see speak. I think a financial advisor or a tax attorney or somebody like that that can help you save money and protect money for the future is big because we get started, get all excited about it, and then we end up not being able to get the best use out of our money because it ends up getting wasted in certain areas that we don't understand right away. But to give that advice sooner rather than later would be helpful.
Yeah, and congrats on the belt, on the ORAD belt going above and beyond the community. That's great.
Thanks. That was a really special announcement that we were actually getting recognized for that because you've been a big part of what we are doing, and I think your face should be on that belt as well. So we appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks as always, Frank.
Yeah. So we'll look forward to doing this again next week. Hopefully, we'll have another exciting meeting and have a bunch of good stuff to talk about next week.
Let's
So
do it.
we'll see you there. Thank you.
Thanks.